Hi Adrian here and welcome back to the workshop. I'm finally back from my trip to the UK for aero testing, and in today's video I want to tell you about how I traveled. At first I wanted to go by car, but because of the weather it wasn't really possible and feasible, so I have flown, which, well, I'm not a big fan of flying, and I didn't have a bike box to travel with. And this is exactly what I want to talk about today. So this is a BW travel box or bike case, whatever you might call it, that I've rented from a friend. And I've worked with different bike boxes before for customers. I've packed their bikes, etc., from Polaris, Cycon, and I rented this one, and I thought it's going to be pretty good, but unfortunately it wasn't. So unfortunately I didn't have time to film the packing and unpacking process because this whole week was a mess. I didn't even do proper training. So to give you a quick brief, this is a pretty small case. So I had to remove the front end of the bike and fold the handlebar on the frame, which is pretty normal. On the track it's quite easy. What you have to do is to remove this little front brake cover, unlatch the brake wedge, and then you can pull apart, if you just undo the 3 bolts, under the mono spacer on the base bar, then this whole thing comes off just like one piece when you disconnect the shifters from the shifter buttons from the blip box. You can just lift the whole aero bar off. You also have to remove the seat post. I had to remove the rear mech as well, even though it doesn't have an oversized pulley wheel system. Of course the wheels have to be removed as well, the pedals, and yes, that's pretty much it. So this is a size small frame, very small, very low stack height, time trial frame, and it only barely fits in the box itself. The first problem I have with it is the actual shape. It gets narrow towards the top, which makes no sense. Have you seen a bike like that before? I haven't. It's a bit weird. And yeah, at the bottom it's not too wide either. And another reason why it doesn't make sense is because you have to pay the sports equipment fee for this anyway. So you don't want it to be small, you want it to be large and protective and nicely fitting. So the size doesn't make sense at all. The height, there's room to spare over there, but the lengthwise, not very good. Then another problem is the width. Now I have a pretty slim frame, as you can imagine. It's a time trial frame, and if you fold the base bar on top of it, there's really not much width to it or height. But the things that I have that are wide are the wheels. So the MV78 is pretty wide at the front. The roll disc is a lenticular shape and it's pretty wide as well. And if I put everything in, you have to put the wheels in these wheel bags separately. There are no attachments for them, which is also not a very good design. You have to put this in the foam and fold the wheels on top of the bike, and I just couldn't close the case, with everything in there. So in the end I had to remove all of the end caps from the wheels just to be able to safely close the box. So that's another afterthought. Then these little straps, they're just too short, they're useless on the bike, at least on the bike side. I couldn't get to connect them together. The top ones, I don't know if they're longer, but on the wheels they fit over them, so at least that works. When you close the box itself, then there are 4 locks. I think they're TSA approved. they should be for this price. There's still a bit of play in the box when you close them, but the hold is quite secure and they lock and close pretty easily, so that's a nice feature. The whole box is an aluminum frame kind of perimeter, which makes it pretty sturdy, and actually whole material seems quite robust, didn't get any knocks that are visible on there. And then finally you put the seatbelt style hook and loop attachment and secure the box together as a final kind of reassurance so it doesn't open. And then when you pack the box itself, it's quite unpractical to live with and travel with, because it's safe, it's sturdy. If you manage to fit in there, it's nice, but carrying it around is a hassle. This handle feels quite flimsy, so that's not ideal. The wheels, none of them articulate, so in order to turn the box or take a corner with it, you have to lift it up, which can be quite heavy and very impractical as well. There's a front pulling handle, which is way too short and way too low. Even for someone of my height, it's quite uncomfortable to pull it this way, particularly if you add on the constant lifting because of the lack of articulating wheels. Of course, wheels like this are going to be sturdier, but I'm pretty sure that's not a huge engineering challenge to make them last even that way. So overall, I think I have quite mixed opinions about this. Next time I'm definitely getting a better box for myself in case I go traveling again. And perhaps it's a good investment because it's not going to get outdated anytime soon. The other things I needed to pack my bike, or at least that I took, I had, since I went to an aero test, I had to make sure that my front end and the bike itself was adjustable, so I had to take different arm cups, different spacers, risers, and also extensions. I've used this foam piping, to cover up the bike and the frame. The wheels were in the wheel bags, as mentioned before, so that's pretty much that. I also took some masking tape because this is easy to put on and remove, and I also use this to mark the positions of the extensions, etc. after the test itself. I've also used a dummy hub in the rear just so the frame can't be pressed, but in a plastic box like this one, that's not really a danger, but it just makes it more practical because the chain doesn't flop around so much. I've also used these zip ties just to secure the chain to the chain ring. I only have one chain ring now, so that could come off easily, with the rear mac in place. So I used that, and I've used another one just to secure the crank in one position relative to the frame so it doesn't turn. And finally, I've attached this box of foam. I think this comes with the bike case, and it's what your bike basically sits against. It's not a very sophisticated option because other bike boxes have sort of integrated shapes and even bike stands in them. So this is quite rudimental, but yeah, it works, at least in this sense. Okay, so these are my impressions of this case. In case you want to rent it or buy it, I recommend, really recommend looking somewhere else because there are much nicer options out there, I think, much more practical. But arguably it did the job and my bike survived the whole trip basically without damage, so at least I can be happy about that. Okay, so if you want to know more about my trip and the results, I need a couple of more days to process the footage. and I also have a lot more going around in terms of my other bikes, so it's going to be busy weeks, a few busy weeks, and if you're looking forward to seeing that, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and stay tuned. It's all for today, and see you next time.